I'm co-organizing an OuiShare Fest, and so Alessandra is one of our key and best featured guests. She's going to be on stage during the first morning on Wednesday the 20th in a very huge Q&A with Jeremy Hyman's. They're going to talk about organization power, how citizens participate, how can they co-organize themselves. So today we just thought of hosting this webinar to talk about Alessandra's engagement in politics and citizen participation, to hear about her experience, and huge experience already, with Meu Rio, and what are her ideas about transformation of politics and democracy through this common, and this common is the public engagement into the politics. So I'll let you start and then we'll quickly some questions. So you have a sort of question thread, so you can ask questions, and I will add them to Alessandra. Well, yeah, let's go. Alessandra, it's your turn.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope everyone can hear me well. I have a sort of so-so connection. I've tried to get a better one, but I'm traveling, so it wasn't possible to have a better infrastructure, but there you go. First of all, thank you for inviting me. It's really good to be here. I really like this idea of having a webinar beforehand, because I think we can have a more intimate conversation that is not on stage. And when Diana and I would discuss here today, we talked about this idea of the commons as a way of saving our democracy. I think the first question when we discussed that theme was, do our democracies actually need to be saved? And saved because behind our democracies this of a crisis, and I'm not sure that we all agree that we are in a crisis. I certainly think so, and I think I would like to spend a few minutes telling you why I believe that we are in a crisis and how I think we can together organize to get out of it. I think we have reason to believe that we will get out of it with stronger democratic institutions and strong commons than we had maybe 10 years ago. So to tell you a little bit about what I've done, members, and these people organize around issues out in that one city, and they participate regularly in decision-making processes in the city. And that has been many learnings, and there's one learning specifically that I would love to share with you today. About 6 months ago, I spoke at Tide. It's kind of crazy. And they then put my video online, and I was talking about the experience of Meu Rio and some of the campaigns that we had run and how our membership was doing amazing things in the city. And at some point in that video, in that talk, I say that new technologies have made it easier for us to make decisions without having to be in the same place at the same time, and that would be possibly a path towards democratic systems. And after the video went online, I got stuck on that sentence. I just couldn't really believe in what I had said in a way. I know that people still have sound problems. I don't know if I can help or if I should carry on. Diana, should I carry on or should I wait for people to? Because I'm looking at the chat here. Okay. All right, I'm going to carry on, but if you need me to stop at any point, just tell me and I can start again. It's okay. So I said that, and then they put this video online, and it's 500,000 people watch it in the first week, and you get kind of it's a really strange feeling when 500,000 people watch something that you have said, because you start asking yourself all kinds of questions about the content of what you said. You're like, oh, should I actually have said? Then was this. I realized that the reason why I hated that sentence so much, and I regret to have said it, was that this is not a question of technology at the end of the day. Our democratic systems are not working for us, not because we cannot fit enough people in the same room to discuss. That's not why we invented representative democracy. Our democratic systems are not working because they were not designed to work for the people. That's not what they were invented for. And it's not a technical problem. It's in the sense that our competitive democracies were purposefully designed to keep a handful of elites in power, and voting in a way is just a way for us to consent forcefully to that exercising power. And then these elites can have a transition, like a peaceful transition of power without having to make war or anything. And they put on a show, applaud, and whomever gathers the most applause gets power for him or her. And that is what the system were designed for. And we've been told for years that the reason why we need a representative democracy was because it would be impractical for everyone to govern. It would be logistically impossible. And here we are, 10 years into at least 10 years into the sort of internet 2.0 age, and it hasn't changed politics. And it hasn't changed politics because this is not a logistical problem. So I think the first thing I would like to tell you here is that our challenge goes well beyond using global or whatever technology we have available to us to make decisions together. Our challenge is to create of governance that take into account the fact that communities and the commons should be the main object of the art of governing, and using those systems of governance to guarantee a voice for people while preventing, of course, tyranny of the majority and other sort of possible implications of direct or participatory democracy. So we shouldn't necessarily be stuck on the technology piece. Like, we have that one figured out already, and the minimal glitches that will be solved in the next 10 years for sure. What we really need to put our heads together to think about is, how do we actually redesign the system, and how do we reclaim the state? Because the state institutions that we have right now in our democracies were not actually designed to serve us or to serve the commons. They were designed to keep the peace, while very few people fight for our applause, fight for our votes, right? And that is not good enough for us anymore. So we start facing the fact that in order to change the way democracy works, we're going to have to go beyond the easy sort of silver bullet solutions. And I say that with a lot of, like, what we have created in Rio is still an easy solution. And I think we need to do it, right? And for the past 6 months, I've been doing that, because gathering people and gathering their voice is good, but it's not good enough. Like, we actually need to distribute power in a way that is meaningful. So people should be able to vote without me having to have an organization, right? And that distribution of power is going to be key, I think, to reclaiming state institutions. So how can we see our role in creating the commons as, in a way, exercising power, and how do we make that more readily available to everyone? I think that's something we need to think about. I hope that all of you watching are thinking about this, because this is the exciting thing that we need to figure out in our generation. Otherwise, we're just going to be perpetuating a myth that is that representative democracy is the only logistically possible way of governing, when it's not. It's just the only politically possible way of governing in democratic societies right now, because we have made it so, and we can dream of something different, and I think we're capable of something more. So that's my main message, I think. And I would love to take questions and talk more, but I think I'll stop there and let Diana ask me her questions first. I can hear you, Diana. I don't know if it's the sound again. I can hear you. Oh, technology failing us again. No, still cannot hear you. Don't know what happened. Should I refresh? Oh, now I can hear you.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much for this presentation. I was actually starting to about your last question. the representative democracy versus the direct one. We talk a lot about this, opposition between the two. Is that the only thing possible, direct democracy versus the representative one, or is there a third way when you have like a sort of reorganization of community participation? Because we always talk about direct democracy, but we are too many, and a lot of people are actually not interested at all in taking the decisions. And taking the decisions all the time, also by everyone, could be a sort of chaos that would be, I wouldn't say non-efficient, but in the end, undemocratic. So,
Yeah.
how you see this opposition? What do you propose? What is your vision of that?
I actually think that there should be a third way. And the fact that we're not seeing it, I think just means that we're not thinking about it hard enough. We're not making it a priority for us when it should be, because it's one of the most important questions of our lives together. But also, what I would say is that it's not about finding a new kind of democracy. It's about being true to the ideals of democracy, not necessarily to the institutions. So I think we should stop thinking about the institutions as being fixed. Like, the institutions should be malleable. They should be things that would change constantly, because they're not the important part. The important part is not how we do it. The important part is what we actually want to do. And the fact of the matter is, democracy is not giving us what we want as a society and as a community. It's not giving us what we need. It's not true to the democratic ideals anymore. So instead of trying to look for a third way, I think we should just take a step back and say, what did we actually say that we wanted when we believed, when we bought into this idea of a democratic system? What was it? Like, it was definitely not that two families would be governing the United States for 50 years. Like, it was definitely not that people who have the most money or the most power or the best connections would be the ones who would keep power for themselves for years at a time. That it was not what we believed in. And as we learn about democracy, even as little kids, like, there's this like very famous phrase, it's like it's the worst system in the world, but it's the best one that we have. Like, that's not true. Like, our institutions may be terrible, but the ideal and the idea that people would be able to govern themselves and that all power would come from people, that is powerful and amazing. And we need to keep that and cherish that. And I think it is our duty, in a way, to two possible paths and just pursue that ideal, no matter what institutions we need to build to get there.
Yeah. So, yeah, like, when you,
Sorry.
yeah. So, yeah, there is a certain way. We're talking about people like taking back the power to define their institutions and change them. What we notice in Europe now is that the politics, like the austerity politics, have been like providing for a complete possession of the political policies by economics. So economics now govern everything. All the institutions must be efficient. They should be rational from the economic point of view, which actually leads to people being completely taken. The power is taken from their hands because economics are actually decided on a whole bureaucratic, expert way, and they don't have this ownership on the market they should have. So my question is, what is your vision of how do you see the austerity policies, the economic austerity policies that are like led a little bit everywhere in Europe and in the Occidental world, and how should we as citizens react to that? What is a way of going out of this ownership of politics by economics and finding a really political way of politics?
So I'm going to try to repeat the question, because a few people were saying that they couldn't hear you, but could hear me. So the question was, how can we get out of this sort of ownership? Like, economics as a discipline is like owning our political debate and owning partisan politics and public policy. Exactly. And how can we actually find a political path? So before I answer the question, I'm just going to tell you, I'm an economist by sort of training, right? And when I started my academic life, I wanted to study political science. And I think a year into, and I went to Sciences Po, I went to Paris for that. And I quit after a year. I hated it. Sorry if there's any Sciences Po in the webinar. I couldn't stand it. So I quit. And then I was thinking about what I wanted to do next. And I think that the reason why I chose economics, and I ended up going to New York, and I got my diploma at Columbia in New York in economics. And I think the reason why I wanted to study economics was that I recognized it as being the language of the game, in the sense that every time I worked for 2 years in between, like I went to Sciences Po, then worked for 2 years, then went to New York, and I was working with a group of researchers that were researching domestic violence and gender-based violence in the home. So I was interviewing girls who had been victims of violence in their homes, right, which was a really hard job. And oftentimes we would have discussions around public policy and how do you actually implement public policies that would prevent that kind of violence from occurring, and maybe eventually actually helping these victims have a big political debate. And every time we would have a debate, you would have like a historian and a sociologist and a political scientist and a feminist and a researcher, and then the come in and show people like 3 or 4 graphs that no one would really understand, and everyone would just agree with him or her. It would be like, okay, he knows what he's saying. He has all these fancy numbers and these like crazy formulas, and we need to listen to him. And that is a form, again, like it's jargon in a way, but it's the way you create power for yourself. It's by speaking a language that not everyone shares. And we do that a lot. Like English as an actual language is the language of the game too. Like if you don't speak English, it's really hard for you to participate in some meaningful decisions at the international level. So I studied economics because I wanted to be able to understand what economists actually said. And I wanted to be able to discuss with them sort of playing field. Of course, I'm not like a PhD in economics, so there's still a bunch of things I don't actually grasp in sort of high-level discussions. But I have the tools, I have the concepts, I have the names and words, and I know how to speak that language, right? So the reason why I'm telling you this is because I absolutely agree with you. I think economics as a discipline has become the most dangerous, actually, tool for political domination in sort of the second half of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st. Like, we make hugely important political decisions based on an idea of efficiency that misses a very important point, that is for whom? Efficiency for what, right? Like, what does it mean to be efficient? And I think one of the most important corollaries of that dominance is at the city level is this idea of the mayor as a manager. I'm not a mayor anymore, I'm a good manager. And like, who are you managing the city for? Like, a city is not, it is not a private company whose goal is very clear, to make more profit. Like, a city is a complex, dynamic, organic place where people gather and share and create value together. And you can't just manage it without a political purpose. So I guess my answer to your question would be, I think the only way we're gonna take that debate back is to have it in our terms. Like, we need to have good people who understand economics as a language, but we also need to be able to talk about this stuff without even taking it as a measure. Like, using efficiency as a measure of the government is not only mediocre, it's completely misguided. This is not what we do. Like, efficiency for what? That is the question that we should be asking for. Like, what do we want to optimize for? Is it for GDP? Is it for happiness? Is it for social value? Is it for social equality? Is it for social mobility? And then we can talk about efficiency. But we're so far away from having a meaningful discussion about efficiency anyways, because we're not clear on what we actually want to do together. What are the things that we want to optimize for? And how do we create institutions that are specifically geared towards optimizing for those things? And then we can maybe reintroduce efficiency as a good government. I cannot hear you again, Diana. I don't know what happens. It's so terrible. Okay, I think she's coming back.
I'm back again. I'm back again. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, so I just had to switch on and off my macro all the time. So no, for now we are efficiency for the investors and the ownership of the 1% and for the production and consumer cycle. So it all changed with the new generation that doesn't want to just live in this eternal cycle of consuming more, to earn more, to actually produce more, and then distribute more to the 1%, and then having social policies to compensate for global inequalities and poverty, but not really basically changing the framework and the social framework in which we live. So you try to change that. Ask you about your actual experience with your project, with what you do with Meu Rio, with purpose before, how you just came to that, what is your personal experience that led you from studying political science, economics, to being an engaged young people, young woman. So your path, what is your way?
Okay. So a few things that were important to my personal path, right? I am the daughter of two doctors who work in the, oh, Diana disappeared. Is everyone still there? Can someone type? Or was it me? Oh, shoot. Are people, oh, you're there. Okay. All right. So I'll keep going. I didn't know if it was my connection. I'm the daughter of two doctors, right? And they both work in the public health system in Brazil. So I grew up sort of very attached to this idea of like a universal public health, and that was something that was really important to my family and to me, and it was part of the way I was raised. I'm also the daughter of two people who come from very different backgrounds. My mom comes from this wealthy Italian family that lost a lot of money during like the multiple crises that we had in Brazil, but growing up, my maternal family a lot of money and a lot of privilege. And in my paternal family, my dad comes from this very, very humble family. He's the first one in the family. Oh, sorry, there's someone coming here. He was the first one in the family to go to college, and they met in college and fell in love and blah, 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 and had me. So I grew up going to these like two different cities, right? Like my paternal grandmother lived in this very dangerous, very poor neighborhood. And my maternal grandmother lived in this huge apartment, like this like semi-mansion in a very rich neighborhood. And she had like 3 maids, and it was crazy, right? And I sort of lived these two worlds. And then as I grew up, I started working with a bunch of different things. And one of the things that I worked with, as I mentioned before, was research on domestic violence. So when I was doing that research, one of the things that struck me the most was that when you interview girls who have been victims of violence, all of them felt lonely. All of them felt like they were the only ones. They were isolated in that fear and in that sense of shame. And because we were doing the research, we were interviewing hundreds of girls. So we knew that this was a public health issue and a public safety issue. This was a political issue. And yet they were living that issue as something that they were living that issue in complete isolation. So I think that's when I knew that I wanted to work with this idea of like aggregate power, of actually connecting people that have the same problems and working with them to sort of create the skills necessary to actually have leverage over instituted power. Like the reason why these girls were not able to change policy around women in their countries is that they were not connected enough. They weren't even aware of the fact that there were hundreds and thousands of them, and they weren't building power together, right? So I started working at Purpose right at the very beginning. Purpose is an incubator in New York that works with this idea of sort of digitally powered social movements. And I was part of the team in the very early stages. I was employee number 3. And I worked there for the first years. And then the company started changing a little bit, as we'll probably discuss with Jeremy on OuiShare. And when I left because I wanted to use the tools that I had learned at Purpose, this idea of aggregating power, aggregating people, channeling voices, but I wanted to do that at the local level. And I think part of the reason why I wanted to do that at the local level was because I had been raised in this city that was profoundly unequal and incredibly hard to live in if you were not coming from the most privileged classes in a way. And I knew that very well because I had sort of seen both worlds growing up, right? So that's how I came to it. And then I co-founded Meu Rio with one of my best friends 4 years ago. And we worked in the very first years, were just trying to build a strong membership. So trying to translate political language into something that was more understandable to people and getting people to know each other and aggregate around issues that they were passionate about. And can people still hear me? I see like a thing on the screen. I think you can hear me. Yeah, okay. And we grew really quickly. People started getting, and totally by word of mouth. Like we didn't have any sort of like marketing or paid marketing for this. Like it was mostly people creating campaigns and asking their friends and family to join, and they would join, and then they would be inspired by those campaigns and create new campaigns, and things would just sort of work like that. And then recently, and that's two things happened that I think are really important. The first one is that we decided that we wanted to take that model that we created in Rio and bring it to other cities. And when we started thinking about that, one of the things that we had to discuss and decide on was, how do we actually do that? Do we take that model and we just sort of like use a sort of subsidiary model? Do we start like trying to get money to hire people in other cities to do this? And we realized that that was a terrible idea. We didn't actually know other cities that well, and it would sort of be really bad work. So we decided to use a network model. And the way we're doing this is we're selecting amazing people in cities around the world. We're bringing them to Rio for a training period of 5 weeks. And we're giving them strategic support and free technology and everything that we know in the very early stages of their organization. And they will set up an organization themselves, and they will run it, and they sort of abide to the principles and do not get any money from governments or political parties, which is a big important point for us. So that is one of the things that happened recently that I think is important. The second thing that happened that I think is also important is that we were looking at our success ratios, and we realized that out of campaigns that are started in one of our platforms, about 15% of them are victories, right? So if you take all of the campaigns that our members have started, 15% of them actually changed the policy that they wanted to change, which is not the majority, but it's pretty impressive in a way. However, when you look at the campaigns that had like strategic support from our when you looked at those campaigns only, the ratio was 27%. And when you look at the campaigns that did not have any strategic support from our team, the ratio was 9%. So a campaign would be 3 times more likely to succeed if our team was involved, right? And that is a problem because our team is small and it will remain small. So we're never going to be able to give that support to everyone. And one of the most important decisions that we have made recently was to actually start a new strategy where we're not growing so aggressively, but rather to train people and give them more tools and knowledge in a way that is more summarized and more pedagogical in a way, so they can actually start doing the work that our team does themselves. So we want to create other sort of groups that have the knowledge and the skills necessary to support each other. And I think that's really critical because many organizations that are powered by digital tend to adopt this very lean model where you have a very small team and then this very large member base, right? Change, Avaz, all of those are doing that. And the problem with that is that that member base is oftentimes powerless in a way that people don't actually understand how campaigns are run. They are just adding their voice to something, but they're not creating the strategy for that campaign. Matthias is asking me what we are training people in. So a few things, like the first thing that we're training them in is how to actually identify a political path to the change that you want to create in the world. And that goes through 2 stages, right? There is a first stage that is creating power with, understanding what are the sources of power within your community. What are the skills and resources that you actually have within a group? And then the second part is creating power over. How do you use your skills and resources to then, and how do you leverage those skills and resources to get another person or institution to change its course of action in a way that it is responsive to needs and wants. So that is the first thing, is like understanding political strategy a little bit better. The second thing is all of the sort of all of the hard skills of creating a powerful communications campaign. Like, how do you actually write an email? How do you design a beautiful piece of sort of graphic communications? How do you talk to the press? How do you use technology very smartly? How do you use social media very smartly? How to respond to hard questions? How do you adapt your strategy when the political context changes? And those are all things that corporations and governments have been doing really well for years, because they hire amazing lobbyists and they hire very expensive PR firms, and they have all of these resources at their disposal, and we don't, right? So in a way, we wanted to create a sort of crowdsourced, crowdfunded lobbying firm for the people, lobbying and communications firm for the people, because everyone else has those skills and tools at their disposal. And if we as a community do not start organizing as well and as professionally as governments and corporations do, we will always be a completely forgotten part of the sort of political process. Does that make sense? Okay. I cannot hear anyone now. I'm not sure if Diana is talking, but I can see what you're typing. So I can
I'm back.
Oh, you're back. Okay. Hi.
Again, when it's hosting. Now, I was saying that we hear you, and I think that everyone is listening, because you give like really valuable and precious insights on how to build a meaningful campaign and how to actually build a strategy with many people. By the way, I wanted to ask you, before like switching to the questions about like questions by people and participants and about OuiShare Fest, what do you think of Podemos, Syriza, in Europe? What is your opinion on this movement? Because you know, like yesterday, elections were held in the UK, and it was a disaster for the opposition. So the Conservatives get back to the power. Everybody like just like quit their positions because they disappointed a lot the course of election. So well, we see these two different directions in Europe. At one political side, you have conservatism that is like maintaining its power in some countries, especially in the UK. It's also the case in France, and in the south we have these new movements, because the crisis is not the crisis, it's the opportunity to build something else. So what's your opinion about the strategy and the future of Syriza and Podemos? Of course, you can just choose one if you don't have the time.
So I'll start by saying that I don't actually know Podemos and Syriza as well as I would want, in the sense that I'm not embedded in sort of the context. Of course, I follow it closely because I think it's important and relevant to the moment that we're living in, but I don't have all of the information that I need. So I would actually love to hear from the Europeans in the group, because I am actually fascinated by it. But at the more general sense, I see with very good eyes the fact that we are creating new political parties that are out of new ways of organizing. I think that's a good thing and a good sign. And I think that is one possible strategy for reclaiming the state. Like, you actually play by the existing rules and you try to hack the game from within. And I hope that that's what they end up doing. I think it's a hard thing to do, because the rules were set up in a way that makes it really, really hard for us to hack the game. So I am more interested personally in how to actually change the rules of the game instead of trying to play by those rules. But I think that playing by the rules is also a possible and viable path. And I think as a generation and as a sort of community of people that want to change government and they want to reclaim democracy for ourselves, we need people that are following different paths, right? We need the activists who are organizing from the outside and trying to sort of poke into government and change the processes that lead to political decisions. But we also need the sort of politicians who are trying to gain access to government from the inside. Of course, the danger is always that both of these worlds will remain separate, and then we'll never be able to have a frank conversation about the challenges that these two worlds face, because they are real. But in a way, I think we need to be more of a mafia. Like, and I say that, oh my God, people will quote me, it's going to be terrible. But I say that because I really do think that we need people that are coming from different walks of life. We need the artists, we need the activists, we need the politicians, we need the scientists, we need the doctors, like we need people that have different theories of change, different ways of changing the world, but that are aligned on the change that we actually want to create. And we need to have a better way of identifying who we are as a community and understanding that we may be taking different paths, but we're trying to get to the same place. And that is important because there is not one path that will save the world or change it. I don't actually think it's my path necessarily. I think what we are doing is a meaningful contribution to it. I think that there are people, not just Podemos in Syriza, but also Partido de la Red in Argentina. There are other like political constructions being made that are trying to pursue the path. Now, when it comes to actual public policy or public discourse, I have some differences with the way that Podemos and Syriza are organizing themselves. I think the main danger that they face, again, speaking as an outsider, is a danger of falling into the same narrative of the Messiah as the politician. There's like illuminate, like this politician that will come and save us from ourselves. I think that's a very dangerous narrative, and it's something that we should be aware of. Like, we do not need a Messiah. There is no like charismatic leader that will save the world all by himself. Like, and I do believe in leadership. I'm not talking necessarily about like horizontal organizations. I believe in the value of and the importance of leadership, but I think that leadership needs to be multi-centric and also humble in a way that acknowledges its own shortcomings. Because the danger when you have the Messiah is that if that Messiah actually takes power, people disengage. They think that that's what happened in the United States in 08. Like, they elected Obama. This amazing movement was created to elect him. And once he was elected, it was like, okay, we've done our part. We'll put you in power. Now, like, do whatever your thing is. Like, make your magic, right? And even good politicians need political mobilization because they need someone to make them do it. Otherwise, they will not be able to negotiate internally to do it. So I think the only danger is that Podemos and Syriza may be sort of coalescing all of the political energy of these countries that comes from sort of this progressive youth. And once they take power, that energy has not been directed to building any other structures that are outside of the partisan system. And that is a danger because if they do take power, they will not be able to govern without people write things. It's a lot easier to negotiate internal tensions in government if you can actually say, this is not me asking, this is the 200,000 people outside of my door asking. And if those 200,000 people were only there when it was time to elect you, and they disappear the minute you are elected, you are not going to be able to live up to the ideals and promises that you made as a politician. So I think that's the only sort of red flag that I would raise for us as people who are watching this. But I think that in the end, the fact that there are new political structures emerging, it's definitely a good thing and a good sign, and it's something that we should be watching with interest in the years to come.
Well, you're perfectly right. Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're perfectly right, because all the last question that we've been reading articles about the problems of Podemos is that they don't know how to maintain the good balance between the leadership, which is basically like in the hands of Iglesias, because he's the charismatic leader who has, yeah, exactly, and the leader who like inspires also the whole population, and the ability to keep all the circles engaging in this political process of election. So it's always a sort of balance between institutionalization, which means playing by the rules that are actually have been fixed before we coming back on stage, and trying to bring something new. And this new is always complicated to maintain, because in the end you have the big parties and they just compel to enter in their game because they define the rule of the game. So maintaining this sort of fresh approach of politics, this ability to maintain the community together and to give them voice, is, I think, the next challenge for all the movements, especially in Europe, when you have also the big, the leader is sort of historical object that is complicated to eliminate completely from history. So yeah. Now we have some questions. before the end with one interesting question that I had. Well, Luke is asking two interesting questions. The first one is, can you help me climb into your imagination? Paint me a vivid, sorry, paint me a vivid picture 1 year from now of what exactly the world you'd like to live in looks like. 1 year from now, or 5 or 10.
Year.
No, five. Come on. One is really too short.
The world that I would like to live in. So there's two things that I would love to see in the world, right? In terms of like the end game, not just the process of getting there. I'd love to see a world that is truly more egalitarian. Not in the sense that everyone is exactly the same, because I don't believe that individuals are made the same, and I think we need room for self-expression. But in the sense that we live in a world where everyone is able, if they want to, and they are giving the tools to learn how to want to do that, but everyone is able to participate equally in decisions that affect them. They know how to do it, they love to do it, and they see the results of doing it. And as a result of that process, people are not afraid all the time of falling behind or being left behind as society moves on. I think that is, just to elaborate on that a little bit, what I see today and that I would love not to see anymore in 1 year from now, is people who are deeply afraid. Like if you are from the very like elites, I'm gonna take the example of Latin America because I'm in Mexico right now and I'm from Brazil, and if you look at Latin America, but even that applies to the United States too, I think to some extent. You look at the elites, and the elites are afraid. They are afraid most. They know that they have too much. They have taken too much. There's too much social hatred in the countries they live in. There's too much violence, and they hide behind their sort of like crazy gated communities, bulletproof cars, and they are afraid of letting their children run on the street. Like, they're just afraid of living. It's a terrible feeling, and I know it because part of my family comes from that elite, and it's terrible. It's like, oh, am I going to be kidnapped on my way to work? And it doesn't really matter how much money you have if you're living like that. In the end, you're just not a happy person, and you feel in perpetual fear. So that's the elites. And then you have a middle class whose fear is to lose its status as a middle class. Because being poor in a Latin American country doesn't just mean not having access to consumption. It means increasingly not having access to citizenship. It means that your children are not going to be able to go to a decent school because you have to pay for a decent school. It means that your children or wife or mother will probably die on a hospital line because public hospitals are cramped and not being well taken care of. So being poor is not just not being able to buy an iPhone 6, right? Like, being poor is like being very rights as a human being, and that is a problem. So you see a middle class that is like working in crazily and feeling this fear in their stomachs that if they lose their salaries, if they lose their jobs, their children will just like be left with nothing, and there will be no recovering from it. So they're also living in perpetual fear and trying to just get by. And then you see people who are unhappy with what they do, who hate their jobs, who hate what they're doing in their lives, but who will not make a move to change it because there's just too much fear involved. And then you see the very poor who are afraid of just not having enough to eat tomorrow. And that is fear of just not surviving. So what I would love to see in a year from now is societies where people are not afraid anymore, that if they fall, there will be no one to catch them. We need to rebuild those safety nets. And I'm not just talking about like social insurance. I'm talking about actually building the connections that make us feel like we are part of a larger community that will take care of us if we eventually need it. And most importantly, a community that will never deny us the very basic rights to citizenship. So that is something that I would love to see in a year from now. The other thing that I would love to see a year from now, that is of course a big crisis today, is like a world that is actually viable for my children and my children's children when I have them. Because right now I'm afraid of ever getting pregnant, because I'm like, what will the world look like in 50 years? Like, Brazil is going through its biggest water crisis in history. The city of São Paulo has almost no water right now. Like, how can we actually think about living in a world that is like actually organically not viable anymore. So how do we recreate a value system that puts like a lot more emphasis on maintaining the natural systems that make life possible? And I think that's part of our challenge too. And I don't think that will happen in a year from now, but I think it could happen soon if we organize it and politically enough.
Great. I have just an additional question by Matthias. So Naomi Klein talks about the growing importance of activism, where we get more practical than even before. What will be the role of activism when it comes to the commons? Return of Reclaim the Street?
Oh, I like this question. Yeah, I think yes, return to reclaim the streets, that's important, but that's not enough. Um, I think as activists, we need to get away from both like a street utopia and tech utopia. Like online petitions are not going to save the world, and sort of occupying public squares will not save the world. Both are really good tactics and things that we should use smartly when we need to. But the game that we need to be playing is one of power, is not one of tactics. So I think as activists, we need to take a step back, stop being so obsessed with like the next political drama, and then although those could be tactically and strategically important too, but we need to have a better strategy for how to reclaim power for ourselves, our neighbors, our families, our communities, so we can exercise it every day. So we need to build the infrastructure of power. We need to build the meeting places, we need to build the skills, we need to be smart about how we actually share what we know. And I think that will be a better way for us to exercise our activism in a way that is not just that is not punctual, that is not just when there is a activism tends to be very reactive because of that. Like most of the time we're sort of trying to preclude something really bad from happening, and that's because people organize rapidly when there is emotional urgency involved. It's like, if I do not do something now, this really bad thing will happen. And that's good and that's important, but it's not enough. Like, we need to be thinking about the long term. Like people who have been holding power for the past 200 years, they're thinking about succession. They're thinking about who's going to take that power in 50 years. They're thinking about the long term. They have long end games when it comes to their own sort of maintenance, right? We need to have the same as activists. We need to organize in a way that will produce really powerful fruits in a year from now and 2 years from now. And for that, like, we have to look at the streets and the internet and any other public infrastructure as places of expression of a strategy, but not as sort of like the end game for us. Like occupying a public square cannot be an end in and of itself. It just can't. We need to have better ways of communicating with each other, of keeping in touch after that occupation is gone, and actually making decisions together, and sharing the resources that we have in order to actually make ourselves as a group more powerful.
Last question by Charles. It actually refers to what we were talking about in the beginning. Don't you think participative democracy is a mandatory step before direct democracy?
I'm not sure if like I would see it as like a chronological order. We are in representative democracy, then we become a participatory democracy, and then we become direct democracy. I'm not even sure if direct democracy is the end game here. I think we just need a democracy. Right now we're not one. Like not one of us. We're just not living in democracies. We're living in this like crazy like oligarchy. Because we are. Like, again, like look at the United States. Literally, like the election is going to be between a Clinton and a Bush. Like that could not be more exemplary. The two families are ruling the biggest economy on earth for half a century, like this very brief interlude of the Obamas, and that was like a 1 in a million year type thing, like literally, right? So I think, yeah, exactly. According to Plato's classification, we are in an elective oligarchy, and so I'm not even preoccupied with understanding again if it should be participatory democracy or direct democracy. I think we just need a democracy right now, and we need to actually redefine the institutions that are in charge of strengthening that democratic ideal. Now, I think the main challenge here, of course, with direct democracy is how do you actually empower the people to make decisions, but you safeguard minorities, so you're not living in a tyranny of the majority, and you also create a place technical knowledge that is important to some political decisions to be expressed. Like, how do you conciliate the political will of the people with the imperative of protecting minorities and the importance of having good information and good knowledge at the basis of a political decision? How do you do that, right? And I don't know the answer, but I do know that we're not thinking hard enough. Probably, but I just don't. I don't think we're thinking enough about it. Like, this is the challenge of our time. We should be talking about this all the time. Like, we should be having dinner with our friends and having a beer and like, so what do we do about our democracy? Like, that should be a theme of a conversation. And I think our mission together here is to make it a theme. Like, it should be the thing that we're discussing in academia. It should be the things that we're discussing with our friends, because that is the challenge of our time. That is the one thing that if we get right, we may be able to actually change the world that we live in. So we need to put our heads together. That's for now, that's my only answer. And I know it's not good enough, but I
love this program. I love this program. It's amazing. I think that's the most exciting thing that's happening now, because that's exciting actually. What we're living in, and the thing that we have so many energies to building alternative models, thinking about it, and refusing just to trying to play all the time the same rules. So I'm really happy about this webinar. We learned a lot. Thank you a lot for everything that you just said, because it's a lot of things that you formulated in very sharp way. And just one last question before leaving: what are you waiting from the OuiShare Fest? What are your objective to people trying to build new political models, like having a party, something like that?
Definitely having a party. No, I think as someone, I think it was Matthias, asked me what I meant by we when I said we as a community, and I said I meant we as co-conspirators, as people who are actually aware of the fact that we need to rebuild our democracies and are committed to that. And I think what makes the OuiShare Fest is to meet conspirators, is to start building that that network of people that I know will be able to change the world. And I think that having a place where we can meet and talk about these things that are very hard is going to be amazing. So I'm excited to be in Paris with all of you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Alessandra. So see you in less than 2 weeks at the fest. And thank you everyone for your participation.
Adios. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao. Bye. Thank you.